Hi, everyone, and welcome to Elevate Your Life on Dr. T TV. I'm Dr. T, and this is the place where emotionally sensitive people get the emotional tools that they need to succeed. With me today is a really awesome guest that I am just so honored by and excited to talk to. And I'm going to read a bit of his bio here before we dive in. So our guest today is Hank Clemons, and he is the president of the HLC Group Incorporated, a training and consulting firm located in Tampa, Florida, and wait for it, the founder of the Society of Emotional Intelligence, SoEI, which is something I'm just so inspired by. Hank has over 25 years of corporate experience as a coach and internal training consultant, working primarily with federal agencies. Hank's areas of focus include emotional intelligence, leadership, and coaching. A seasoned professional with a multi-year experience in public and private sector organizations, Hank leads each seminar, and each course leader has an advanced degree or extensive work experience in areas such as internal management, organizational behavior, human resource management, and business administration. Hank, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. I appreciate that. When you were reading that bio, I was wondering, where did that come from? That doesn't sound like me. At least I don't see that. I do what I do because that's what I feel. So
yes. Oh, I love it. Well, as I like to say, we have people that do that, right? And those of us that are so deep into this purpose of developing emotional intelligence and capacity in our society, you know, I get it, Hank, we're so connected to all of this that it can almost be like somebody reading a bio of like, who's that person that they're talking about? So Hank, I'm really so glad to have you on. And I'm giddy because, you know, there's a certain amount of us in the world who really deeply feel purposeful about this area of our life and our foundation for being a human, which is our emotions.
Yes.
You know, and you and I both know it's like this area that people really are undereducated in, under emotionally educated in, and often afraid of. So tell us about the journey that you've been on that really had you, you know, prioritize this in your life.
Wow. When you say journey, it has been a journey, a long journey. And if I can, I'm just kind of give you some snippets of how I got involved in this and why I got involved in it, and maybe where the inspiration came from. Well, if you will, the inspiration came from when I was attending a community college in California, in Los Angeles. It was called LACC. I had a professor who was a psychiatrist because my undergraduate or my community college degree was going to be in psychological services. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So he was teaching Psych 101, as we might call it in those days. But he also had a private practice in, I think it was either in Malibu or somewhere. I don't remember the city, but he would often come to class and he would share this thing called group dynamics. And that within group dynamics, the people would get together and they would share their feelings, or they would share their emotions on whatever it was that was impacting them. But once they did that, they felt so much better. And that was the beginning, because that was inspirational. That to me said emotions, how we feel, plays a big part in who we are. Now, I wasn't thinking that at the time, of course. You know, that's graduate level thinking. You know, I was community college level at that time. And so that was the thought. But I knew at that point that whatever my direction was, whatever my career might ultimately end up being, it would have something to do with that. And I thought, geez, I'd like to, do what he does, But then you needed to have a PhD to do that. And when you're in a community college, that's the furthest thing from your mind. It appears unattainable because you're thinking, geez, if I can just get this AA, I will be okay. Little did I know that, over the years and things, you do the AA, you do the bachelor's, you do the master's, you do the PhD, and lo and behold, you're there. Now, there's a lot of things that happen in between, but it's one of the single most important reasons why I currently have a private practice as an emotional intelligence and well-being specialist, but also it's probably the single most reasons why I got into doing and having the Society of Emotional Intelligence, because it all began there,
Wow.
And I won't say how many years that was ago, but it was a few years ago.
Keep it real. Keep it real, Hank. No, I'm just kidding.
That's right. That's right. So that was sort of the beginning. That was the, if you will, what gave me the insight that emotions play a big part in terms of who we are and what we do. So along the way, since that time, obviously I've done a lot of other things, but that was the beginning.
And Hank, as you found yourself even going for that degree, and being connected, it really, I love the psychological services. What do you think it was about your personal journey preceding that had that really connect for you? Had you be inspired and then expand that inspiration and start to follow that inspiration? What, is there stuff, can you dish it, Hank? Like what was in your personal journey that you feel really had that feel like that this is the path I'm meant to go down?
Yeah, Dr. T, honestly, if I say I don't know, it's because I really don't know. It's just, it's like when you see the ideal car, you say, that's it.
I
Or,
want
see the ideal person that you want to be married to, you say, that's him or that's her, or whatever it is. Sometimes there are things at the subconscious level that we don't know because we don't give it that thought. So I never really gave it that thought, but certainly within my life and most people's lives, there are things that happens that might be what we would call some emotional events or even a substantial or significant emotional event that led me there. But I really don't know if it was any one thing. It's probably a combination of things over my lifetime prior to. So that's the most and best and honest answer that I can share with you.
Well, and I really love too what you're saying about that there is so much in the subconscious, and yet when there's something that we connect with, and we have that sense of it, it is that way where we're connected to ourselves, we're connected to something that's present in a situation or in a person, in an object, and it makes a lot of sense to me. But I know, given that, our audience are people who are emotionally sensitive and highly driven and often can struggle with emotional sensitivity and also are learning to really use this superpower to have it be the asset instead of a big liability to them. So I was really curious, do you from, in your time on the planet from an early age in life, do you recognize yourself as having been sensitive and intuitive to things that were going on in the environment and attuned into that? Or was it more like, that it really was that moment where you just knew that's something I'm into?
Well, I was not, and I still don't think I am what we call an HSP or a highly sensitive person. So at an early age, the only thing that I can reflect on, and it's basically how I am now even, and that is I was a bit shy. Now, doing the work that I do, you can't be shy, or at least you have to overcome the shyness.
Right.
So at an early age, maybe that may have been one of the things that, I was shy or reluctant to express myself because, of course, kids at a young age in general are encouraged to be heard, to be seen, not heard.
Yeah.
So with that, a lot of our emotions get stifled at an early age. And of course, we don't know that. All we know that what we're doing is we are obeying, or we're doing what we're being told. And it's later that we discover, or someone helps us discover, that our emotions were put on hold, or we were discouraged from expressing that emotions or those emotions at an early age. And I think for the most part, most young kids, or kids in general, not necessarily today's kids, but kids in general experience that. They may hear no 1,000 times, and they may hear yes, maybe 3 times in a day. So
Oh
it's
my gosh. Hank, you're really touching on some things that I think are so important uh, to just dig a little deeper into. And from the recognition that there's so many different words that people use to things that we identify with, and I really do feel like one of the key indicators is that when somebody feels shy, that can be a sign, or recognizes one's been shy throughout their life and their upbringing, that shyness can have a lot of components to it, right? That
correct.
it could be that the other people's emotions, or there's a subconscious kind of backing away from that, and a subconscious fear of whatever the responses are. There's so much there that changes our emotional response pattern from an early
Right.
age. And what you just said about the generations of children who all became adults, right? At least chronological adults, right?
Right.
The jury's still out on how many emotional adults we've got in our
Right.
society today. However, that being seen and not heard, imagine through the generations of how much emotional suppression that created, and pathology that created,
Yeah.
and how it really is just this latest generation with the technology and the putting everything out on social media that has some sort of a liberation to feel like it's normative to say whatever you want. And so thinking about everybody it's no wonder our society has had such emotional struggles, just thinking about that concept that you mentioned right there.
Yeah, yeah. And to add to that, I want to say, and the shyness that one believes that they are, or have, or had, may not have been shyness at all. It may have been that there was someone else who was more assertive, and because they were more assertive, it sort of stifled you, and you were normal, so to speak, but they were more assertive, those around you. And because they were more assertive, you didn't get a chance to express. It's
Right.
not that you were shy, it's just that you didn't get a chance to express because there was someone else that was more assertive than you.
I love
That's
looking
the
at
way of
things like
looking
this.
at it.
I love looking at things like this, and this is why I love emotional training and the study of emotional intelligence. And I know why we enjoy this, because it's such an infinite layered study and
Right.
science. Because if we don't have a connection, and we're not really developed to have a big connection with ourselves, which is something that's really much more of this new era, then we don't even recognize that we're reacting or being a person in response to other people, rather than the nature of who we would be, right? If maybe our whatever it might be, our older brother wasn't as robust or boisterous,
Right.
or whatever. And so to understand the self is so fascinating, to see like how did all this develop so that you don't keep repeating these patterns of having more assertive people shift how you express or don't express yourself?
Sure, sure,
Right?
exactly. So, and so what I've tried to do over the years is, and that's probably one of the reasons why this society exists, is I wanted people to be more aware of their emotions and be more able to not just manage them, but to have them work for them rather than against them. And often that's what happens. People, emotions work against them, or they are unable to be able to effectively use or manage their emotions so that it works, so that they work for them. And so that's probably a part of what I would like to have happen, and that is have that emotionally intelligent world where we are having them working for us rather than against us, in a short way of thinking about that.
Yeah, well, yeah. And Hank, continue a little bit more about the mission of the Emotional Intelligence Society. The Society for Emotional Intelligence.
That's
Uh,
okay.
I'm like shortening it,
Well,
flipping
you
it.
can call it SOEI, and that's okay.
SOEI. So tell
Yeah.
us some more about this vision, this mission that you're leading here.
Well, just the fact that I think emotions themselves are important. Okay. And there are many of us in walks of life, all walks of life, and ethnicities and genders and all, don't have a good handle on that, on their emotions. And it's not that they are not aware of it, they may be aware, but they don't know what to do about it. And because they don't know what to do about it, they continue doing, because that's how they're built or wired, so to speak. It's
Mhm.
so like, if no one ever tells you that, that you smell good or look good, you don't really know it, I mean, you have an idea, but that's your perception. And it's other people's perceptions that really help make us or drive us to be who we are and things. So, as a part of the mission, it's not so much mission, vision, and all that, but it's what I would like to have as an overall outcome, you know, and that is whether people are actual members of the organization or they are people that we touch or people who maybe attend some sort of seminar or workshop or just tune in once a month to what I call an EI Banar once a month.
That's cute.
Once a month, because we don't have meetings like we used to have on a large scale, then I do a 30-minute EI Banar in which we'll have a guest or someone who will come on and share some tidbits of information about emotional intelligence and their take on it. So, for instance, you could be a guest and you would come on and share. Of course, no, don't shudder.
I'm already there, Hank.
Okay. You would come on and share, your thoughts and ideas. It's 30 minutes, but it's a way to do what you do, but reach other people, you know.
Nice.
And that's all I would like to have. So if there's a legacy, it would be that's part of the legacy I would like to leave. That at the end of the day, that was my contribution here on earth.
Yeah. So no, I feel that we're kindred spirits here, Hank, in this
You
quest, in this quest for people to be able, I think, to acknowledge their emotional intelligence. And like you're saying, we're really on the same page here. Instead of this having emotions feel like they're a liability, and really connecting those dots, that I think is so important for everybody, that generations of children being in a inferior power position and
Right.
being, just we're smaller, and until you get bigger and you can your voice, more of your voice can come out. There are patterns of suppression and pathology that develop and conditions responses. And so I feel like we're a very young emotional society. Like our emotional evolution, like we all age chronologically, but
Right.
the emotional developmental process isn't quite as strategic as it needs to be in our world from the beginning, so that even parents could understand that old concept of, just follow what I do and don't have any say in it, what that's doing. And so in this quest to really grow an emotionally intelligent society, I just can feel, I think of nothing that could be more important for our foundation of humanity and everything that we build on that emotional foundation.
Right. Right. And I've attempted to pencil or write a couple of different books around emotional intelligence. One was titled Emotional Intelligence from Mailroom to Boardroom. That was the
From
title.
male, I love it.
So
Yeah.
the intent was because the title would communicate the fact that, everyone, everywhere, regardless of what level they were, should be able to, or could be able to, or would be able to use their emotional intelligence. It didn't matter if you were at the boardroom level or at the mailroom level, okay? So that got, some reading, by some people, but it still didn't communicate, I thought, what I was really trying to share. So then I came back later with another one titled, Could Your Emotional Intelligence Be Holding You Back? Now that was sort of for the people to look at and say, so how could my emotional intelligence be holding me back? Well, there are people who, maybe a low on impulse control, as the saying goes. So if they're very impulsive, it may be preventing them from attaining whatever, or someone who lacks emotional awareness. It could be holding them back because if they're not necessarily as aware as they should be, then they may be missing some things or may not be aware of other things. So again, the intent was to communicate the concept of emotional intelligence and how it impacts people. Well, I wasn't quite done, as the saying goes. And so I came back. My recent one was titled EQ is for Everyone. You see, I'm still trying to get the idea out that emotional intelligence, hey, everybody, you can take advantage of this. You should be doing these things.
Right.
So my last one was called EQ is for Everyone. And then a second edition of that is now out, called Emotional Intelligence is for Everyone, second edition. But in the second edition, I thought that it would make sense to try and put in some information to help people be able to recognize, understand, and then grow in their emotional intelligence. Because there's two ways of looking at it. There's the knowing side of emotional intelligence, and then there's the doing side of emotional
Right.
intelligence. Many people know what emotional intelligence is, but they don't do it. And so the intent now is, and I'm trying to narrow this thing down, and I think I'm getting closer and closer. The intent is to not just know, but to do.
Oh. Yeah, because you can have self-awareness all day long, but if it's not activated and if you don't know how to harness all of this emotional capacity into your outcomes, like you were talking about, Hank, then it's like having there's this incredible repertoire that you're not even aware of, or how
Right.
to utilize it. And again, I really feel that this comes from there's so much that happens quickly in a human population, in a society, but then there are things that take their sweet time.
Yes.
And emotional education is one of them that I think is still, it shouldn't be a sideshow in schools. It should ultimately be a main event. Um, because to all the points that, each one of these books are just talking about the fact, like, there is not a human that is not running on that doesn't have their emotional system running and activated and stuff, but then perhaps not knowing the instructions of how it works and how to use it.
Yeah.
And I just think this is also why we see so much amazing stuff that people create, and then so much destructive stuff that is so unproductive, and you go, how is this being created by the same population here?
Yeah. Because, I think, there's a lack of, in general, there's a lack of the application.
The application.
And so my focus really is not about teaching people about emotional intelligence, because that's the learning, that's the educational piece. There's someone or some ways that they can get the information. My focus is really on how, and let's apply it. So
Yeah.
that becomes, and so a part of the update of the second edition of the book talks about the hierarchy of emotional intelligence. Okay, so just think in terms of Abraham Maslow and his
Yeah.
hierarchy of needs
Yeah.
concept. So with this concept, we're saying that there are three levels to emotional intelligence. There's a conceptual level where people go out and they learn about emotional intelligence, and that might be good enough for some people just to simply learn about it. And then there's the operational level, and that's when people start to take what they've learned and start to apply it. They go, oh, I learned all about impulse control. Now I know what it means. I can do something that helps me be better at managing or
Yeah.
dealing with my impulses. So I can now start to apply the impulse control stuff that I learned about. But then there's the authentic level, which is the top level, if you will, of the hierarchy. And at the authentic level, you don't have to think about how to apply it, because it's a part of your value system. It's a part of who you are. It's a part of what you do on a day-to-day basis. So like driving your car and you're coming up to a signal light and the light is yellow. Intuitively, you know that the lights are going to turn red after that. You automatically start to put your foot on the brakes. Well, in some places, other people step on the accelerator.
Do they do?
So in this particular case, it's automatic. It's what you do. You've internalized the concept of emotional intelligence, and you simply do emotional intelligence. And while we may or may not agree with a person like Gandhi, for instance, we could easily say that Gandhi had a high level of emotional intelligence, probably at the authentic level. Or you could say that Mandela may have been at the authentic level of emotional intelligence, simply by the way that they went about living their life
Right.
and dealing with things and people. So just because one knows about emotional intelligence doesn't mean that they're at the authentic level. It may just simply mean that they're at the operational level where they can apply it. And applying it may be good enough for them. Sort of like a company that has, let's say, the company says, we're a company and we support 7 habits. So as employees, when employees come to work, they talk 7 habits all day long. They use the concept of 7 habits. But the minute they leave work, the idea about 7 habits and all of that is gone, because it is not a part of who they are.
It didn't get
Emotional
conditioned.
intelligence,
Yeah, it didn't get conditioned.
right? With emotional intelligence, I would like to see it become a part of who we are, a part of who the individual is. So therefore, you're not thinking now, how should I use this?
Yeah.
it's a part of your framework. It's a part of your value system. It's a part of
Right.
who you are. So you just simply do. You don't have to think about it, you know. So that's
Well,
where I would like for us to evolve to.
I love this outcome that you're talking about and the pathway to it. I'm getting some feedback on my own voice here. Uh, let's see, just a moment.
Okay.
So Hank, I'm thinking about so many things in this outcome that you're talking about, and the all the parts of this matrix. And because I remember years ago in my more activated conscious journey to understand why, was I uh, successful on many levels, but still in pain and reacting. And one of the things that really came clear to me is how much knowledge everyone has, and by a certain point in life, there's a certain amount of crystallized knowledge. But why is this awareness? All the time we're learning, we've learned from history. We saw something our mom was struggling with, and we think, that didn't work very well. And this is what really worked for her. And we have all this knowledge, but it's not always activated. We're repeating patterns all the time of emotional struggle and difficulty and reactivity. And I really was looking at this. I'm going, what is awareness? So maybe in the age, the different ages of our human development as an overall society, it's like self-awareness became so important, and yet we weren't emphasizing awareness in action. And so as it goes, whatever we're conditioned for, I feel like we grew into a society that has a lot more self-awareness, but our numbers, our numbers, our health numbers, and our chaos of everything is going in the wrong direction. The more knowledge there is. And so Hank, you're hitting on something very, very important, is that awareness be activated and be conditioned and become part of us. So it's like when we are pulling, your example, we're pulling up to the stoplight, I don't have to think to myself, yellow light, make a move. It's already there, and it is already activating. I think, I was about to ask you a question of why you thought society is still having these, still seeing what doesn't work and where people are successful, but repeating all of this, and in this year getting worse. And I think I think this is maybe what we're hitting on the head today here, is that there's a lot of awareness, but that's a very different intention. So your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts on that is not so much here's why. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I see just people in general are at different stages of development, if you will, as human beings. You know, as human beings, we've only been around for a very, very short period of time. You know, when we talk about evolution. So therefore, there's a lot of stuff that we don't know why we respond or act the way that we do. There are some people who do, and there are some that don't, but it's just the way that we're wired. I I don't think we have an answer, a concrete answer that says this is why. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's it's a part of our evolutionary process. I think,
Yeah.
because we
Well,
have eventually we're going to morph into something else. So what we are today is not what we're going to be 100 years from now, or I'm going to go further out and say 1,000 years from
right,
now. So
right.
we're forever changing. So
Well, and you're having me realize too something that I've been aware of, but I always love the next level of understandings and activating that understanding, is because for so long, what I noticed when I was younger and having therapy in my young 20s, and knowing so many therapists and having so many clients that have been through years and years of therapy, is, it's making sense to me even more today that therapy is often the model for psychology is still so much about awareness, and you're gaining the awareness and gaining awareness. And what would happen in for years of my practice in my emotional training company, people would say, I've been in therapy for 10 years, 15 years, 2 years, and I still don't know what to do. And my life, I know the problem better, I understand it, but my life is not changing. And I'm recognizing, and this is really an impetus for starting an emotional training company where we go, let's, put this into activation and get where that is really automated. Because even our structures, I haven't tuned in for a long time, but my sense is that psychology schools and I think we're still working off of curriculums that are so much about understanding and self-awareness, and not as much about the things you're talking about prioritizing, right? Which is the absolute activation of the application, as you're saying, and having that become so much more automated that we can elevate into an emotionally intelligent society.
Yeah, well, unfortunately or fortunately, we as humans have different values depending on how you were raised, depending on where you came from, depending on, your ethnicity, depending on the country, all those things, you know, all those things goes into shaping our values. And our values, we emotionally respond to our values.
Yeah.
Okay. And because those values are different, you sometimes will have different emotional reaction to things. The closer we become to having a core set of values that pretty much operates around the world and across the universe, maybe, the better we can be at doing that. So, for instance, in most societies, thou shalt not steal is a core value. I don't hear know of any culture that says stealing is good, let's do stealing. Most say, nah, that's not a good thing. What we have to do is perhaps start to find where common values are, and then you use that as a launch point. That's just my thought.
That makes a lot of sense. And, again, this goes along with what you were talking about earlier about as you've been writing these different books and expanding your work and your contribution. And you said something about, you're getting closer and closer. And I feel like you're saying it's like, shrinking it into its easiest application for people. And I really related to that because, there are so many frameworks. There's so much data that we get. We're
Oh,
stimulated
absolutely.
24/7. And I remember at a certain point going, I've got to get this even more practical for my own self, to be able to contribute and be healthy and happy and enriched in all these ways. And this is where it sort of eventually came into sort of this question, which is I could use in any moment, anything that was going on, and the question really was, am I in a reaction or am I in intention? And this for me was about, am I, cycling in some emotions that might be conditioned, automatic, conditioned responses that are going to be unproductive and shut down my cognitive capacity? Or am I in intention? And if I'm not in intention, I can ask myself, what's my intention? And it might be to go grab lunch or something and nourish myself or fuel myself. But the moment I started getting into intention, then I found that that application of emotional intelligence tools became a lot easier and
Mm-hmm.
simpler, and that there wasn't a moment in time that I couldn't kind of quickly do that formula. And
Yeah.
so it sounds like your work is continuing to just keep giving people what is in fact an emotional education all the way through understanding, all the awareness, the operational parts of it, and where it, like I said, it becomes you.
Yes. Yes. I probably am spending most of the time around the where it becomes you than anywhere else
Okay.
because, you know, that's a part of my evolution.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And Hank, when you look at this landscape, you know, of this, it's obviously been the most fascinating year, this year that we are in this 2020, with, you know, quite possibly the most emotional reactivity and overwhelm and overstimulation. And so it's just just an emotional, just highly emotional. We all know the word unprecedented, where humans are trying to process what is occurring, that was occurring in such shocking and rapid ways. And so what's been your perspective about, you know, everything that's been occurring, the social justice movement, all of that, as it relates to emotional intelligence, the political realm, all of it?
Wow. That's a big question. And the only thing, and again, this is my narrow view, is that I'd like to see people be able to use emotional intelligence to help with any of those issues or situations that they're currently dealing with. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to be speaking today virtually uh, at West Valley College down the road from you. I think it's in Sarasota. No, yeah,
Are you? Oh no, I'm in California.
yeah, no,
Oh,
Saratoga.
Saratoga, yeah,
Yeah,
Silicon Valley.
Saratoga. I get Saratoga and Sarasota mixed up.
They do sound similar,
Saratoga.
but yeah, we're close by.
Yeah,
Well, virtually.
yes, virtually. Yeah. So they're having sort of like diversity and inclusion day at their school or whatever. And so they looked me up and found me somewhere or another, you know. And so I agreed. And so I'm going to be speaking on emotional intelligence as the missing link to diversity and inclusion.
Oh, you got it.
So for me, I think emotional intelligence is the missing link for a lot of things,
Me too.
but I'm applying it today in talking about how typically most organizations, when they're talking about diversity and inclusion, they have edicts, they have policies, they have different ways of talking about it, but it really has to be done at an individual or personal level. Each individual has to take responsibility for their own way of being and doing. And that's where those values come in. So if it's not against your value to see fairness in pay for both men and women, then it doesn't matter about the company having in the manual or human resources guidebooks and stuff like that, that they are strong supporter or believer in equal pay, because it's just not going to happen because it's against my values. So there's what we call cognitive dissonance that's going on. You're trying to get me to do something that I don't fundamentally agree with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and primarily because that's what the conditioning is, and people don't even know if it's their conditioning or their actual beliefs, because whatever you've been exposed to or whatever's been going on for generations, if you don't have the emotional intelligence to kind of dismantle, what is this, my value system? Would I choose it, or was I just given it, you know, along the way, or absorbed it? And you know, so much good stuff here, Hank, because it isn't, I mean, I'm connecting so many great dots. It's like, isn't, I mean, come on, the missing link, that, you know, there's so many metaphors about like the missing link, and this really is the missing link. I feel like we, you know, we know this, that emotional intelligence and really understanding our emotional system and how it works and how to use it to propel ourselves, to know each other. It's so fascinating to me, which is why I thought this is where I want to spend my life and my career, because even as a kid and, you know, as a teenager and still through today, I think to myself, without emotional intelligence, this is why a person could see another human who is obviously human, and we have more of our human selves in common with a few variables. The variables are so much fewer than all of the ways in which we're created. And what type of emotional conditioning would it take to not recognize another human and all that we would be with each other and for each other and to each other if we were able to have what I feel emotional intelligence gives us is it puts us into integrity with
Yes,
something rather than conditioning, which is so silly for people to, it really is fascinating for people to believe that somebody else that basically almost entirely looks like them except for a few variables and it could be somehow less valuable, less important.
absolutely. Agree with you 100%.
Yeah, so the
But it
missing link, so
exists.
this is really important.
But
uh
it exists. And so we have to find a way to, and I call it to overcome the cognitive dissonance. And I think that emotional intelligence is a tool to help overcome the cognitive dissonance that exists. So,
it's so true. Now, Hank, tell us
yes.
before we go today, give us a sense of how people, what they can expect in working with you, working, having you help them with their emotional intelligence, or anything that they should know, so that they also can connect with you and follow you, and really benefit from you.
Wow. What can they expect and what can they get? Uh, well, because I see and I do treat each person as an individual because they are. Uh, when I see or when I began to interact with someone, I want to know where they are on whatever level they're on so that I can meet them where they are, so to speak. So that's where my conversation generally will begin. And that's how I think that I can, I don't want to use the term help, but I can certainly partner with that person to be their best self. And that's a part of what I want a person to eventually be is their best self, whatever that is. You know?
Beautiful.
So,
And where do you want people to connect with you? How can they follow along and start to benefit from your work?
well, they can do that one via LinkedIn. There's, just Hank Clemons, LinkedIn. They'll find me there, or they can just go to the Society of Emotional Intelligence, SoEI.org, and that's another place to find me. Or again, HankClemons.com, that's another place. And if all of that fails, then you can, maybe some people are numerical people and they remember numbers or whatever really well. I'm at 813-431-9786.
Hank, that is incredible. Thank you for making sure, right? We've got a fail-safe plan for people to get connected with you, Hank. And my last question, which
Yes.
I ask everyone on the show, and I'm really collecting some just beautiful um, pieces of wisdom for our audiences. And it's really about, in this work, we know that we've studied so much, we've learned so much, we've shared so much. And also, there's the encapsulation of things that we really want people to know that can help them on the path to growing more emotional intelligence, not only in awareness of it, but in the activation of its power and productivity. So, Hank, if this just happened to be the last moment that you could give a message to the world, and this would be what they would carry on through their lives, and it would carry through the generations and their families, and they, have that. So this is what Hank taught us. What would that message be?
Wow, that's a tough one. But to make it short, it would be don't talk, do.
Okay, everyone, you heard it from Hank. You heard it from the founder of the Society for Emotional Intelligence. Hank, this has been just such a distinct pleasure today to collaborate with you and serve this important priority
Thank
of
you.
emotional intelligence in the doing, in the activation, in the application. And so I invite all of you that are watching to just take into your hearts and into yourselves and internalize what you've learned today and begin to apply it in your life, knowing that you too can have the most elevated life and how you define it and how you want it, and to be able to make your contribution to society through using your emotional intelligence. Thanks for being with us today, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks for listening and tuning in, everyone.